Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR. And I'm your host, the counselor. And today we're going to be talking about separation and divorce. Now, recently we know that there's a lot of divorce going on, at least 20% increase. And I think that's largely in due because of this COVID 19 lockdown. However, it's still an increase. And now, prior to COVID 19, they said that it was actually the numbers were going down. However, now that it's a 20% increase to what it was last year, that means we need to have a little bit of discussion on some of the reasons why people are getting separated and divorced, you know? And I know if you're one of those people who've been separated or divorced, you're going to know that it's like a whole different world. It's different things to different people. Some people really hurt from separation and divorce, and then there's other people who aren't so hurt. Sometimes that was a situation where they weren't really happy in. And before we get into all the statistics and research, I mean, these are just some of the reasons why people do separate and move along in their relationships is because they're like, you know what? I didn't feel too great in that relationship, or that relationship actually wore out to the point where I was ready to move on. I didn't even know who I was. And when I did know who I was feeling like, you know what? This isn't going to last forever. So there's different ways different people can take separation and divorce. It doesn't always have to be the negative. I think relationships can be outgrown, and there are things in a relationships that could definitely cause people to split for sure. And that's what we have to talk about. But there are different ways of seeing split. Some is the hurting split, and the other is the relief split. And some of it's the happy split, where the person's like, hey, you know what? I was in a relationship. I did the best that I could. However, it wasn't for me. And I'm happy. I'm done. So divorce doesn't have to seem like it's all negative all the time. For certain people, hey, and there's also the other fourth perspective is that it could be amicable. Where the two people agree, you know what? We're ready to make this move on. We've enjoyed our time and this is it. We've both just decided to move on to do other things in our lives, and maybe we've got years left to experience different things with different people. That's okay. That's how diverse the human being can be, with all these different perspectives and experiences and emotions that they go through, especially during separation. It's a wonderful thing if you could think of it. If you're thinking at it from one perspective as it just being all bad, then you're missing the boat. And it's not really, but I mean, the majority of people in society say, oh, that's negative. No, that's why we have to talk about it. And what are some of the antecedents to this thing before the bus goes on? What happens before? And they're saying that some of these people would that get into some of these relationships, they just, they have, for one, they might have religious differences. These are some of the reasons why people split up. Could be religious differences. You know, it's they just they get together, they love each other, but then whether they got into it with opposing religions, then they figure out what, it just doesn't work. They don't match with each other. We have different beliefs, and then that could be a major issue, and that could be a point of tension and separation, right? Just understanding that. Also, they say that there are people out there who don't really get educated on marriage prior to, or relationships, or what it's going to be like. So they say a major thing is they don't know what to expect, and when they get in, it becomes a whole different game. So they're saying that people who don't understand a little bit about it, the education that they receive prior to getting married, those are the ones, right? They just up and get married. They don't really understand what the consequences are. So that's a big challenger when you think about people who are uh, getting into those relationships and then they split up, right? That would be definitely something that you have to think about. How much did you know going in to this relationship? But as little as you did know, it impacted your relationship. So you could have known more. And of course, one of the biggies, I'd say it's one of the biggest ones to keeping these relationships apart that really, I'm telling you, family. And I don't care what ethnicity you're in, What culture or religion? Family. Family is one of the toughest ones when it comes to support. Like lack of family support. And you know it's so weird because you think you could be getting into a relationship, you and your partner, and then if you might love your partner, but then there could be other people in the family that won't agree with the relationship or jealous of the relationship. And you know what? They just hunker down because they all know each other, and then they end up giving you a hard time in your relationship. And it goes, or you've got habits or commonalities in you that they don't agree with, or like raising your child. See, some of you got to put this podcast out there because you know we're going to be talking about it all when I'm talking about raising children and how that can impact the relationship as well, especially on the opposite side of the family when they think they know better when you're trying to raise your own kid. I'm telling you, I know this stuff. So what I'm saying is this is experience. The counselor is coming from the perspective that, you know what, he's talking to people about this, professionals. So I'm just imparting this knowledge onto my listeners because I think it's so important. But the lack of support of families, it's it's just astronomical. You just can't understand the impact it could have. You could try to do everything that you can, but when you got a family and they know the attention that they're not giving even you or your partner, or they know it's hurting them, and it's all ridiculous stuff. But families do these things. Families get into this silliness because you know what? Simple minded people just caught up on ignorance. And you know what? These are things that really import their negative perspective into a relationship, or rather inject it into a relationship, and boom, it's challenging for a lot of people. And some people who are close maybe to their mother, do you know what I mean, they find that, guess what, what am I gonna do? So they end up listening to the mother, and you know what? It never gets right. So then you're struggling all the way. So there's so many dynamics that go on, especially when family, you know what I mean, exterior family are trying to give their input. There's so many things, and there's so many ways that they could come at it. It's a big challenge. At least 17%. That's big to me. 17% of the divorce rate? What? Uh-uh. You know what I mean? No. That is large. But I also have to say a big issue that people do come across is when there's health problems. You know what I mean? Serious detrimental. That could be detrimental when someone's ill. Because you got to think there's things that go on that you would not think of naturally when somebody's dealing with illness. See, a person, and as much, and it is doesn't even get to the point where it's just about love anymore. Could be about illness and that person accumulating a lot of debt because of the illness. You know, and the pain and the loss itself. See, this is like the 1, 2, 3 punch. You know what I mean? And and the partner's not able maybe to maintain this. You know, hold up their side of things. You know what I mean? And so it, might require somebody else to step in there and help out. It happens. So if you're in a relationship and you can't keep that contribution going, somebody's gonna step in there and take it over, because you know what? That's a big one, and it sounds deceitful, but it's really not. It's just the way it is, and that's even greater. You know, greater percentage, at least 18%. And then there's one that I know for sure that is paramount. And I will tell you right now, domestic violence is really high on that list. You know what I mean? Like, think about it. Domestic violence in relationships where people are physically threatened, you know what I mean? Shoving, elbowing, even throwing objects at each other, spitting, just destroying equipment. It's just astronomical, the things that were going down. Violence, physical aggression. It's just something that gets out of control. And just imagine, and I know if you're not in that relationship, you can't really think this way, but just imagine if you're a person that's in that relationship and you're dealing with this domestic violence, and that's where people can actually come to find themselves residing in, which basically means they're living that life all the time. This is something that they're doing, and it's almost like they're feeding off each other, but it's become a way of life. And it's not, doesn't go to, it goes to the ups and downs and excessive or what have you, but it becomes a lifestyle. And there are people that, probably more than what you know, live that lifestyle where some of that stuff's existing, right? We need to get to the numbers. But the truth of the matter is, we know domestic violence could be in all different sort of ways. Men, women, it doesn't matter what we're saying, but I know the percentages and I know how high it could be for men with that violent stuff, but women have their percentage, but not as nearly as much as men. But if it were, let's say if I were to give you the statistics exactly to say, okay, so half the women are being abused by men, and then there's a quarter that's not being abused by women. So then all you have to do is say to yourself, whatever statistics I do present, there's going to be a percentage of men that have not reported. So I will never really get the numbers because, number one, that's not a traditional thing that we do. We do not acknowledge those things. And that's one of the things that's been going on in society for years, is that men can't really talk about it if it's going on. So the statistics are always going to be skewed, right? Think about it. Ego, shame, embarrassment, whatever we want to call it. It's deep. But that's not the point. The other point is it should not be happening. Men should not be doing that. I do not believe at all in that physical violence on women stuff. And I know there's men out there doing it. And I know they say women get out of control. No, I think they do. But you got to know what you're dealing with. You got to know that, and I'm going with women too. I'm going to say the same thing to women. If you're doing it, you know what I mean? And there's women out there and they know how to do what they're doing. There's men for sure, but there's women out there doing it. And they know sometimes they can get away. The man could, most times, there's situations where a man can take a physical advantage. I'm going to say. No, not all the time, but there's a greater increase, right? Let's be real about it. But my thing is, when we're talking about this physical violence, it's not even just about that. It's about the fact that violence, period, is going in there. But we do have to acknowledge that. So right there, that should not be going down. I don't believe men should be doing that at all. I think no. I'm very strict when it comes. I think you should keep your hands to yourself. I don't think women, and I'm not going to back that up. I'm going to just lay off it and say I don't think they should be putting their hands. If you got to put your hands on a woman, you shouldn't be doing it anyways. But if you do, you're out of control, right? So that and that right there will mess with some relationships, men or women. Transgender or lesbian, gay, whatever. The whole point is anyone who has to deal with that has to understand that it's going to impact the relationship. And sometimes it goes on longer than we care to believe in these relationships. Serious. People have to put up with some things where, you know what, they just deal with it for years and you got to feel for them. And you're just like, wow, sometimes it's a matter of not feeling that there's a way out. And it's not, I know, as easy as we want to say it is. And it's not. And I'm talking to a lot of the women out there. I'm gonna do it because I'm gonna stick to it. And I'm gonna tell you that no, it's not easy to suffer in silence. You know. And I gotta talk to those ones. And I'm saying when you look down at yourself, if you have young people or not, you have to value yourself. And you know what? You have to find ways to get yourself to a spot where you can think for yourself and do for yourself up to a degree. But it's not always that easy because there are a lot of, not a lot, but there's a percentage of the women who depend on some of these men. And see, once you depend on me, you give me what? Power, right? You give me power. And once I got that power, I know I got that power. And I'm going to exert that power. So I just tell women, no, you better understand you got the power. You ain't going to do nothing. If he's what, you don't need to be with him. But the point is you got to know you have the power. You really do. Right? And there's guys out there that know that. But see, the ones who are getting physical don't have the power. They're trying to get the power. Do you understand? They don't know nothing about power. If anything, that's a loss of power to be putting your hands on a woman. You should never be doing that. You know what I mean? And there's ones who've done it. No, that's not what it's about. There's a lot of men out there. You know what I'm saying? So I don't condone it. And I know I've seen it. I'm telling you, I've seen a certain amount of that stuff going on. And it's not been nice. And I ain't said it's been easy. But then how you going to feel like a man? And there's guys that'll do that. There's ignorant. See, there's always an ignorant part of our population that we can't explain. We just can't explain an ignorant part of our population in this world that we just can't explain. It doesn't matter how much research we will do as human beings. It's because we're animals. They may be animals of a higher being, but there's always a certain part of the population that you just can't explain. And it's terrible. And for what it is. And what you got to do is just kind of keep working at it. You know what I mean? Where it's not acceptable. And we got to keep talking about certain things. But I go on that subject because I'm really passionate about protecting people, all people, women, men too. Like, so when I'm talking, I'm not just talking from a women perspective. I'm talking from all perspectives, but I do know where the numbers lie. Right. And there's a lot of women being victimized. And you know what I mean? I'm not gonna play that other card because I don't need to. Right? I don't need to. It's easy to say what's right, wrong. The consequences might be great for a lot of us, but to know what's right or wrong is important. Do you understand? And to be able to say it. That's more important. But this is what impacts relationships. But did you know that another big one that really, I was really surprised when I understood and read about this was the amount of substance abuse that impacts relationships. You don't even think it's as prevalent as it is. Like 50% of couples have some issues in their relationships because of substance abuse. And I'm thinking the greater cause of that substance abuse is that drink, that fire water, right? That Holy Ghost in the glass. That is the stuff that people are tearing up and it's messing up with their relationships, but they can't put it down. And you wonder why they can't put it down because all day, every day, they got number one, they got messages. I think that's what pays for half the commercials out there, media and advertising and R&D, right? Is the messages through that alcohol and substance, right? We shouldn't really be surprised at that. I was a little bit more surprised it was higher than what it is, but seriously, we shouldn't really be surprised because we know we're being advertised. You know what I mean? All day, every day. And now it's everywhere in grocery stores and LCBOs. So we got a lot of it. So it's going to be hard for it not to be a part of the relationship. I'm really surprised now when I think of all the influencers. I'm not as surprised now because it's a machine going on we talk about, right? To get you to buy that drug. And people are buying it. And it's impacting the relationship. And they can't put it down, right? And it impacts it in so many different ways. It's still a drug, but how does it do that? You know what I mean? How does it do it? It just it imparts it. You know what I mean? It creates some deficiencies in some decision making for sure, or a lack of judgments, right? Or unclear judgments that you make due because you're under the influence. So you know what I mean? It might not be permanent, but just by those little lack of judgments that can in fact impact the relationship. And that's what substance abuse does. And I would say the main culprit is alcohol, some form. And one thing I'm going to worry about with this COVID-19 that we have not even seen yet, but we are going to see some serious. If you think the rate has increased by 20%, what do you think is going to happen if this COVID-19 is going on for another 6 months to a year? That's going to balloon at least to 40%. And it's going to balloon mainly in part because number one, people are going to be locked up. Number two, financial problems. See, people having money problems. It increases the stress and the tension in the relationship. Right? Tensions rise. Right? And they don't know where the next paycheck's coming from. Or if they're going to live when they get back from work. See, people having money problems is going to be a major increase. So if you think it's around 36% now, could you imagine in a year from now what the rate of increase in will be for financial problems? It's going to balloon. It's going to skyrocket. And you have to keep this in mind. So people now, see, my concern is that there are people that, you hear in the news that they're taking some money and they're saving it, like the government money, you know what I mean? And they're like, oh, they're not spending because they're in. But I'll tell you right now, You would like to think they're going to spend properly, but what's going to happen is as soon as they get the opportunity, they feel free enough, they're going to blow all that money because we're trained to blow the money, right? So there'll still be financial problems. So this thing is impacting us for sure, right? I know of a couple that I couldn't really believe it, and I knew that it was going to be. You kind of look past it because you're like, love is love, but I knew a couple who I just didn't. I kind of didn't agree with it. Kind of messed with me morally when this, older man married this younger girl. You know what I mean? I thought like that was to me. You know what I mean? Like it just creeped me out a little bit. You know what I mean? And I'm saying that right to me that's a big one for me because that puts on and that's personal problem because that brings alarm bells. You know what I mean? Like I'm not. You can't. To me, I don't believe in all that. Where you're in your 40s and you're messing with a 20-year. I don't care. I'm not about it, but it kind of freaked me out. And I kind of thought, oh, I did. And see, you know what? As years go by, you learn. Like, well, I kind of thought it was weird, and it didn't really work out. But should it really have worked out? Like, once you go through your years in life, trying to get back those years is kind of right. It's almost impossible to do. But there's people that do it, and then when you look at the person when they're 70 and this person's what 39, 40, you go, that's weird, right? So what I'm saying is, nah. You got to. Those are things that impact. Like if you're dealing with minors or youngers and like inexperience, basically not the congruency of having the same life experiences. To me, that's an important thing, and I think that happens. But there are also people who they don't really stick together because they're too young. They just think they think they love each other, right? They think that they have something in common and they don't really understand love and they want to be with somebody or somebody's come along in their life that's going to make them feel loved and make them feel better in their lives, because maybe the family's getting on their nerves. So they attach to another young person and it happens. It happens. And then they go away when they're young and next thing you know, they realize that life is real. There's bills and responsibilities and hey, and maybe we jump too quick. We're not because they forget about the stages of having to get to learn themselves, right? That's what I believe. I believe that between the mid about 17, 18 up until the 22 area, I think now I'm finding that that's when young people are still, but around 18, they're really getting to know who they are. Like they're trying to still discover who they are between in the 20s, early 20s and late teens. I think young people are still trying to get to know who they really are. So that could be a problem when they're too young and they're trying to get married and there's so many things that they have not considered. But that is one of the major issues why people's relationships split up and it doesn't really get a chance, right? And it's very common. See, we talked about domestic abuse, but I think what we haven't really considered is maybe the conflict. Because I've done a podcast on conflict resolution, but I'm thinking conflict and arguing, you know, that is one of the biggest things, but it's happening so much that you say, why is it having such an impact? Because I think it happens in relationships and marriages, but even in relationship, there's arguing over something, right? They're arguing over something. And see, this is podcast number one we're talking about today, right? Based on this separation and divorce. But we're gonna have to go through it because we're going to get into more specifics on, things like jealousy, how that plays a role. Because I think that's gonna be a podcast in itself. But I'm just letting my listeners know that that's gonna come. But I'm just talking about conflict and arguing. It plays a very big part. People not being able to resolve issues calmly and effectively, and especially during this time, there's going to be a lot of communication problems, right? Communication problems will increase. The intensity will go through the roof. And there'll just be so many negative feelings just going back and forth between the two, just over, just even, I don't know. I think when you get breaks and you work out there, it gives your relationship a break. It's a breather. But if I think a number of people are arguing, period. Not all the time as much, but it could get to the point where people are tired of arguing. And the thing with arguing is what is happening with arguing is that people argue, and the longer you argue, you end up saying something that you really don't mean. And when you say something that you really don't mean, you can't take it back. You just can't. You want to when you think about it after, but if you're strong enough to do that, do it. But arguing, especially if you're arguing, and sometimes you just want to be arguing and you can't stop yourself from arguing. And then you know what? You just go to that point where you're saying things and they're saying things, and you go and it's a back and forth game. And I can understand why that is at least a 57% to 80% of why relationships split and divorce happens. But I'll tell you right now, what's the biggest one? Everybody, all my listeners should know what is the biggest one. And we have to talk about this biggest one because after we examine this a little closer, it's one of the biggest, almost at the biggest, but I want my listeners to think after we examine this, we're going to have to ask ourselves one question, right? And I will tell you that one question, but we're going to ask ourselves one question with all this infidelity and extramarital affairs. And that is one of the super giant issues of relationships, the infidelity and extramarital affairs. Almost 60% of relationships that split up are over infidelity and extramarital affairs. And for some reason, I don't know why, that's playing a bigger part than I thought it would. I don't know. I thought maybe it would be in the 40% or even 30%. Like most people go, well, it can't be happening all the time. Everybody can't be messing around. But that is too high. And that means there's some freaks out there. And there's some people who are putting on some false faces, smiling in your faces, even at work, and you know they're out there running around. And the funny thing is, recently I learned there's people that let it go on. So this could be a lot worse. You know what I mean? There's people that let it go on. I mean, I heard something crazy in the news the other day, right? About who was it? Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. I heard that, and this is some news. And I'm not usually into spread news, but I heard something about Jada Pinkett Smith was out there, had a little boy toy, and the boy toy was on television saying Will said it was okay. And I went, what? Will said it was okay, but then I'm thinking, see, those people are operating in a little different stratosphere than most of us. They got money. They can, you don't know what's on their mind, but I don't know if he said it's okay, but I kind of think he did. Being 2020, he probably said it was okay, and a lot of us probably would say that, but we're not in that stratosphere, a lot of us. So I don't know what they're doing out there. They might be sharing so much out there, they don't know. They're like, why are you asking? You know what I mean? So this could be some crazy shit the rich people got going on up there. But I still say, wow, I guess the round table's got some serious conversations for all of us because we ain't learning enough. Clearly. I mean, I say move on. Like, what's all that? Because, you know what I mean? What if, first of all, I don't even think they're about spreading that disease. I don't think they even thought about catching the COVID-19. That shit's faster than AIDS. But I guess that's what rich people do. But infidelity is a big one. And it really surprised you. And what are some of the reasons why people are having extramarital affairs? I don't know. I think that's that question I wanted to ask people: is are we animals? Yeah, I think we are. And some of us, we have these urges and and these attractions, and I don't know. Like people are right. And we're magnetic in a lot of certain situations, but it's so deep that it's not only a physical level, it's a psychological level. Somebody could be attracted to somebody, or somebody could be around somebody. See, we're so funny and magnetic as people that these little things that we're doing is really people like, unfortunately. Not all of us. A lot of us keep cool, We're like, I don't want to spread nothing. I'm cool right now. But then there's a lot of people out there doing it. So not all people, though. Let's get that straight. It's good to have some security and understanding. But hey, there's a lot of people out there doing that. Right? And when they're out there doing it, when you understand that that's happening all the time, you got to say to yourself, well, wait, Is this something that we do as human beings? Is this something that's really a part of our nature? Right? And some people would say no, but if you understand how high this percentage is, then you would have to question it. This infidelity and extramarital affairs, right, is real. And it could be so many things from people not getting. But I would say one of the major things it is about attention. That's the word, attention, right? Think about it. That is the backbone. That's a book in itself I could write on attention. And I think I'm going to do that because that is what it's about. That is going to impact relationships. And I want my listeners to watch out for that book. It's called Attention, because this book that I'm going to be putting out there is going to be talking about all of this. And it's going to be really covering about where's our attention all the time, because that's where we gravitate towards, right? A lot of the decisions that we make and problems that we have in our life are based on a lot of things, but one is attention, right? It's a part of it, at least. It's a part of every conversation, and a part of every action and reaction is attention. And it's a part of relationships, right? And that's a very big part of relationships is the attention. We are seeking, or you know what I mean? And it could be as subtle as somebody just catching somebody's eye for that, catching their attention. See, so this is how deep the book's going to be. We're going to cover that. Just catching their attention, just looking at them. There's certain people that go, damn. And that's just who they, and that human nature comes out. But a lot of us people who want to be safe and secure and in a relationship go, I don't understand that. You know what I mean? But there has to be some order there. And yes, there is. I agree with all of us. But you know what I mean? I agree with the order. I do, because you know what? It's respect, but it happens. This is a part of it, and we have to recognize and acknowledge it. But that's a big part of relationships. That split, whether it's divorce or just being in relationships, right? That's a big part of us. And you know what? It's hard to accept. You know how deep it is for us to accept. It is. It's a hard one. And see, when people get hurt from that, even in a relationship, they go on the revenge move. And they, you know what I mean? Some leave and then some go on revenge, and it just becomes convoluted. But they say there is a king or queen of the hill. Lack of commitment. That's it. They, and it's funny because you are up there, you are doing your vows and making your commitments. And see, this might be how psychological it goes. When people go through that, and a lot of, even if you're going to City Hall and somebody is actually taking you through the motions, and you got that in your mind, and it's implanted in that brain. And see, we don't think, man, we don't think that it's in that brain. But I think, just think of the psychological understanding of, if you put somebody out there to commit for a marriage, and they prepare physically and mentally prepare for this day, or even set their mind upon that day, and their mind focuses on that day, the imprint on the mind is just unimaginable, because that mind, and there's minds, believe it, and we're learning this today, there's minds out there that are taking that vow so deep that when you cross that, and you know what I mean, and you don't show that commitment, they're just out there. And I think that's a big part of it too. And it's just that, even that, I think that's why that ceremony, and not even just getting that process done and solidifying that contract, and those words just keep coming out of our mouth. See, the words that come out of our mouth, they're so powerful, and yet they're so detrimental to our relationships if we don't respect them. And that commitment is something that is on top of the hill. And if you put on that commitment and you make that promise, it's almost like putting on a uniform and breaking that vow. Do you understand? No, you can't do that. You have to pull yourself back, and there has to be some balance in there. But once you imprint that on somebody's mind, they got that in there, and that's what they're living by. And that's why this is number one, is because of lack of commitment. You know what I mean? There was a lack of commitment. And that person is, they just, and you know what? Some people just fall out of love. And some people, some people, don't feel romantic towards their partners. They turn from that initial love, it wears down, and they become like the best friend. And they're like, I don't need to commit to a best friend. I've been with it. There's that lack of commitment, that lack of, right? And it happens in relationships. And you see it, like we even see it with all of the young people can see, even in the media, where their stars are together for 1 or 2 years. And some of us are saying, wow, I can't even believe they lasted all these years. And the ones that usually last most of the years are ones that have been out of the limelight after a certain period of year. And then if they're still around, they come back for a minute. Though you say, oh, they've been together. Other than that, those stars go through it. And you think, you know what? What's behind some of that? Some of that's marketing, I believe. But the point is that some of it's so-called love. But they're not doing anything different than the rest of the population out there. But that lack of commitment's big. So if you feel you don't love that partner, you loved them initially, or she loved them, or they loved each other, and that goes down and that fades away, hey, it just changes. And this is the thing about people. This is the wonderful thing about people. We have emotions and we change. We're not static. We have emotions and thought, and things do change. But the problem is, some of us aren't ready to change. So that's where the problem begins, right? Some people don't want to go with it, but too bad. Some people do it anyway. They're like, it's changed for me. And it's not always that they're looking for attention in that way. They've lost someone's attention. They purposely, no, they didn't even lose it. They don't want that person's attention anymore. They want to just live their life. They want to be free. They're not in love anymore. And that happens. I can see how that can happen. Right? And it's not even just about time. I can see how that could happen. And you know what? It could be as simple. Listen, this is how, you know what? This is how deep this goes. Like, there is so much to think about, and it's so wonderful. I want my listeners to spread the word, because think about that, right? Like, somebody could be in a relationship, and it could be something from, they got married, they loved each other, and then maybe one person wanted to have a baby, and then that person couldn't have a baby, and then that person, right, could have said, you know what, like, you know what, that's not what I really want. Or they could have thought because they loved him, they're going to do it. And then they decided that they didn't even really want to be it. That's just one reason. My thing is, there's a lot of different reasons why people could lose that. And that could have just been something that, hey, I loved him. And then that lust that they had for them just switches, it changes, and it just moves on. And maybe that was something that impacted their relationship negatively, and they lost that luster for that person, or that desire for that person, just based on that. Or it could have been a death in the family, or it could have been, you know what I mean, an abuse. There's so many different things, but there's things that people become, less committed in so many different instances. And it's hard to put a dime on it, but that's the number one. And just understanding these causes is just important. And there's so many more causes that are out there. There really are. There's so many more causes that impact relationships that we don't even really could get into. But I would say and this is a touchy one, because there's a lot of people that don't even really want to talk about this. And that's when you're in a relationship, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but when you're in a relationship and your partner has a child from someone else. And yes, there's a lot of people that will say, you know what, I love you no matter what. And they get into it, and they're genuine in their, mission to be with that person. They're very genuine. But see, they don't know what it's going to be like. And there's some that don't have problems with it. But then this is a part that causes breakup too, right? For relationships to last, is when sometimes you bring other children in, and then the person coming into the relationship, they can't, they like the kid, but for some reason, it's just not a connect. It's not what they want, or they see that it's a lot, or if they don't see that they're going to get their own out of it, or let's say they get with a person that's older, because usually that's the case, where not all the time there are young fools out there that just jump with girls with kids. I'm just kidding. But when it comes to older, like think of an older couple where the person's older, a girl who's older, maybe late 30s or whatever, and she's with a younger guy. And the problem is, right, she don't want no kids and he still wants kids. You know what I mean? That's a problem. And it's the same with men too. I've seen it happen. Is where he's in a relationship. He's already got kids from his former relationship and he's with this younger girl, not much younger. Maybe he's probably about 50, she's probably about 36, 37, and she wants to have some kids before she hits that 40 mark cuz apparently 40 is the new 30. So she wants to have some kids, and he's like, I got my 20-year-olds. I don't want no more kids because it's going to take some work and he might not have the energy or he just doesn't want to do it. But he's, whatever it is, she's not too young, so he didn't think that she did. But then she wakes up and decides, hey, I want to have kids. She has a right to do that for sure. But, you know, he might not be ready. But guess what? She might go, listen, I'm still young. I don't need to be with you anymore. It could be that cold, right? Or it just, they both split. He knows he doesn't want him and he walks away. There's so much that could happen that it's interesting even to talk about. But these are the reasons why a lot of people split up. You know, we talked about the money, talked about the gambling, people who have gambling. And see, when we talk about gambling, a lot of people get in their mind that gamblers are just those ones that go to the racetrack or they go to the casino. Oh no, those aren't the only gamblers, right? There's people that are out there gambling for real. And I mean, they're gambling on those. And I would say this is about 90% of the population in Canada is gambling today in 2020. And they're giving away a lot of their wealth. They don't even know it. They really are. But there's a 90% population. And I'm telling you, ones who can breathe and walk and read, those ones who could walk into a store, those are gamblers. Those are the ones who are gambling. And you know who those people are? Those are those Lotto 649, all those scratch win tickets, all these. And you know what? Isn't that sad? But that's the way the world has gotten to today, right? We're in this state of mind. And why are we in this state of mind? Why are we doing that? Because we're hoping for the big win. And some people are like, yeah, it's just a little dream. But people are hoping they'll kick some. But you got to ask, why are so many people hoping? And why is it that we don't know anybody who's won? I've never met anybody who's won $30 million. That should be a big question. But there are people out there who are gamblers. They're doing scratch win tickets, and there's a lot of people out there probably saying to themselves, well, that doesn't equal up to problems in the relationship. Um, no, it does add up to problems in relationships sometimes, right? When it could be as simple as bingo, right? Person that can't, scratch and win starts getting all these debts because it's easy. 10 here, 5 here. That stuff can add up to $100, $200. And next thing you know, somebody's borrowing money to pay that $1,000 credit card. And then it just keeps going on, or the spending, right? Just the shopping. But I'm saying there's gamblers out there who are gambling, and it looks like, it's almost like, you know what I call it? I call it the dollar store conception, right? We have a misconception of what the dollar store is. When you walk into the dollar store, everything seems to be a dollar, but when you walk out, you're paying 50, $60. So that dollar store got you. So that's what I call it. So people buying tickets, it all adds up, and then they got this addiction, spending $100. If some of these people were to put that money in a 2% GIC over the course of 10 years, they probably have, 10 times their money, at least 4 to 5 times. But see, people don't do that. They're out there doing it, and that impacts business. People hanging out at bingos, right? Gambling. And of course, the regular ones. And there are ones who go to the casinos, and that's problematic because you can lose a lot of money and commit a lot of money to your relationship. But that's probably, we're talking about maybe less than 2% of why marriages split up, right? The gambling. But it's still relevant on reasons why. And if you think of, are there any other reasons why people would split up? What are some of the causes for these relationship splits, right? And it could be um, perception change. It could be the perceptions of change, how they view that. And it could be cultural differences. We don't really talk about cultural differences, but we spoke about it for half a second. But when you think about the cultural differences, is that if, let's say, for example, you're raised in a country where their laws are very strict on how you treat your partner, and then you're coming from a Western society where it's perceived as more democratic, more open, and then you go to a country where, it's more, you know, uh, divisive. There's a policy in place that there's a class system, a gender inequality, shall we say. And see, that person coming from there might say, hey, I love this person. However, they can't, they go to not just to the country, they don't even have to leave their own country. So even if the person's staying in the West, let's say, in let's say United States or Canada or whatever, and that person is married somebody and maybe they didn't understand because they're raised to believe, or love me for love me, and they didn't even understand the impact that it would have on their relationship, right? Because some of them are serious about that stuff. They wrote books about it, and how I got to read them thoroughly, but I read a certain percentage of them, and I'm like, wow, there are certain things out there that are just people have it in a concrete thought in their mind that ain't gonna change on how things got to be. And what I'm saying is this is real. And so that person coming from maybe a more democratic society sees those things and they think at first they can handle it, and then maybe they don't. And then there's some that actually do handle it. But I'm saying the reason why some of them split is because they can't. And it could be vice versa. That person coming from that other country that has their laws and established norms, right, and religions and all these set in place that they just adamantly believe, that they come to a country, they might go, no, I don't agree with it. So they don't like their ways. They don't like women walking around, uh, open to do what they want to do and say everything that they want to say or have vote, whatever. They might not like that. And that's going to impact the relationship. That's going to make a difference. And then they won't be together. Right? But these are the differences. This is how we are as human beings. There's so many things that can impact the relationship, some of the causes. But what about when you have to deal with this pain? We talked about the reasons why. However, what about what you go through after the split? Or what are you dealing with? This could be one of the most stressful and emotional experiences in your life. Such pain. And it's going to trigger some unsettling emotions. It's going to be extremely painful because you shared your commitments and your dreams with that person. You've had romantic relationships and you had your ups and your downs, but you've had a lot of ups, and you were hoping that this was going to last. But when it doesn't last, this is a profound disappointment. And then, you have that grief. And then you find that you're in a situation, in a place that you're just really not familiar with. It's like a land of loss. You're just taken aback. You're walking through a new door. Everything seems unfamiliar. Everything is disrupted. Your home, your relationships, your responsibilities, your friends, your family, even who you are, you start to question who you are when you go through something so deep. It just brings in such an uncertainty in the relationship. And if you're the one on that end that just doesn't want it to end, think about how you're going to feel. You're going to be feeling like, what am I going to do without my partner? And we know some people have gone to the extreme on that one. We know it, and I've seen it. I've heard about it, that love thing, because that love thing is a powerful thing. And people are doing some real hurtful things to themselves, and some people kill themselves. It's crazy. I'm gotta tell you, but they go that crazy. Now I ain't even talking about none of that. I'm saying, but it's real, right? We know where we're at. We shouldn't be doing that, but it's real for some people. But that's a question that you got to ask yourself, right? What would I be like without that partner? And some people go to the extreme, and there's other people go, I'll be fine, And a lot of people want to tell you, oh, you'll be fine. But the fine doesn't mean quick fine. So it's individual. And there's other questions you got to ask yourself. Will you find someone else? If you even get to that point. Because some of them won't even want to, but then you'll still be asking yourself, will I be able to get someone else? I told you about attention. It's deep. We're going to talk about that, but that's a question you're going to ask yourself. Will I find somebody else? And the scary question of, am I going to end up alone? What's really going to happen to me? Where am I in my life? Is this something that, and it gets deep for certain people. It gets deep. But we all have these questions that we ask ourselves. The difference is how long are we asking ourselves these questions? How long are we feeling this pain? How long are we able to suffer in silence? How long is it going to rain? That is what we're going to be feeling at that time. And it feels terrible. It's a disruption in your life. And uncertainty. And this uncertainty, it means that you're going to be dealing with some difficulty in your life. And it's going to take some time. You're going to just have to remind yourself that you can and you'll get through. It will be difficult. No one's going to say it's easy. But you can and you will get through. You'll be able to move on at some point. You will. But the question is when. And it's different for different people. You just got to know that there's different things that you can do for yourself. If you want to really cope with some of the separation and pain, you have to understand that in order for you to cope, you have to understand it's okay to have different feelings. It's normal to feel angry, sad, frustrated. You might even feel confused, and it can really be intense for you. Feeling anxious about what's going to happen in the near future is very common among people who are separated or divorced. You have to accept these reactions that are within you. It's going to be scary for sure. Will scare the heck out of you. Especially if you were in an unhealthy relationship or a toxic relationship. You're going to have a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions, and you're going to need to really take care of yourself. And that's going to take some work and some time. So one of the things I strongly recommend is when you're coming out of the situation, that you don't try and get yourself into another, because we are so vulnerable at that point. And we're also open to being supported. Right? Think about that. That's very common that when you get out of a relationship and especially if you've been in a tumultuous relationship or, high emotions and you come out of it, you got to remember you got to take care of yourself, and you have to understand that it's going to be okay through time, right? But you have to recognize that these strong emotions are going to hit you, and you're going to have to deal with it, and it's going to take some time, and you don't want to just jump into another relationship because you're vulnerable. And some of us do that. We go right into safety and security mode. It's what I call safety and security. You want to protect yourself. You don't want to be hurt anymore. You want to go to a place that's secure. You want to be with someone you can trust. And there are guys just waiting to do that. But women too. But the thing is, you got to take your time. You got to process. And I do mean take your time. And I would really strongly suggest that anybody that's just getting out of a relationship, a divorce, at least take a year. Take care of the business within that, because some people might have to tie up things from that breakup. So you don't consider a new relationship. It's just going to complicate things, especially when you got to tie up loose ends. And you don't think that you will, but you will. Whether it's paying off bills, closing accounts, whatever. This is part of the process, but just some closure for yourself, or moving your stuff on, because there's certain people that play some real mind games, especially when you split up, to keep you coming back. And you don't want to be doing that. You don't want to just, oh, I got to pick up this, or I got to get that, or I got to close this deal to make sure. No. Give yourself that year to take care of your business. Recognize you have some serious emotional stuff to deal with. But if you do get out of a relationship, that's the first thing you do is you take at least a year, clear up off your dirty work, take care of your business, and then, take it easy from there and do some real reflection. Because relationships, especially depending on how long they take work. So healthy or unhealthy, they do take work. So if you are really looking to be productive and move on, know the reason why you're dealing with the situation and understanding whether it was good or bad, you have to deal with it. So you have to also give yourself permission to give yourself a break. You got to be able to feel and function, at a less than optimal level. And you can't do that if you have another person that's coming on in your life trying to get your time and your attention. You're not going to be as productive, and you're going to need to be productive in the first year or so. So that is something I strongly recommend. You got to give yourself some time, a break. Make sure you got to regroup. You got to heal. You got to re-energize your life. You're going to be down. You're going to be somewhat deflated. You know, the only heroes out there are the ones on TV. Matter of fact, I call a hero a sandwich because other than that, that's it. I'm piling it up as big as I can, tearing it down. But that's a stress relief. But there's no real heroes out there. That's television. That's all made up. You got to take time for yourself. You have feelings, right? And for you to heal, you got to take time, organize your thoughts, relax your mind, take the stressors off, and understand who you are and get your power back. And that may mean that you have to do some adjustment in your life. And for you to adjust, you got to be in your best state possible. So until you are there, until you are at that functioning stage where you can actually function, then boom. And see, some people say, you know what, there's people that go back to work when they're going through stuff. If you can function and go back to work, that's fine on you. Because I had a friend of mine that went through it, and my buddy here lives down the street. My buddy, he's telling me about, oh, they're going back to work real quick, and we shouldn't be telling them to go back. They need some time to process. Well, sometimes they do, but then it's different for different people because there's other people that will sit up there and go back to work with it on their mind, and they might explode. And that's what they're afraid of. That's why he's telling me this. But the truth is, there's other people that say, listen, I got to go to work. That's the one thing that keeps me sane, you know? So it could go either way. I can't say which way to do. All I can say is that it could work in any which way. Is that somebody might need to go back to work. That's their sanity. And it's true. We like to we sometimes where we got all these misconceptions that are in society about love and life, right? The home life is a cool life. We get it. We love it, and we do. We love our home life to a certain degree. But there's not everybody likes it or dislikes it. They just love their work life and they love going home to their people for sure. They love their time. But there is a segment of the population, right, that they enjoy being at work. Home is not the main. It's not even about a choice. It's just about that's their thing, right? And that's okay. But you got to give yourself a break, and you got to take time. And the less that you put on your mind, the better you can think. And don't want to get your brain all convoluted with somebody else coming in too quick, too early, trying to save the day or trying to understand. Because remember, once you're in a relationship, no matter how that relationship was, real relationship, right? I'm not talking about a fling thing. I'm talking about a real relationship. Once you're in a real relationship, there becomes some sort of connection for sure. And there's I'd say a mental toughness about it and endurance that you put up with because you learn to live with people and you learn to accept them in certain ways. And it works until it doesn't work. But all I'm saying is it can be very complex. And when you connect, this is just as simple as being somebody beside you. I mean, you're giving up space and time in your life. So just imagine how deep that is. So take that just as important as when you do have a split or you have a break. You can get through for sure, but don't deny how the relationship either was, or even if it was a terrible relationship, there was still some mental connections there where you vibed on a certain level at some time in that life. So that takes work to understand and get through that. Right, that mental cognitive connection that you have with people. Some people go, they use that anger and they just cut it off, but still, even after they do that, they still need work with it. Even if that, right, because you could cut that person off, that's great, that's immediate, but those people are still going to need some work. They're going to still need some work because they are shutting something off, and some could make, and it's better for some just to move on, but then there's some people that it wasn't just that, it could keep messing with them in their future in their relationships, right? And maybe they didn't get proper closure, whatever. The whole point is that it still takes work no matter what it is. And I think it takes, and I can't say it takes closure all the time, but there's a lot, there's a big part of separation where there is no closure. And people just go, it is what it is, and they move on. And it's acceptable. And then there's one people that it's sad because that's a segment of society that don't get the closure that they want because it wasn't really they're loving the person. Sometimes we don't really want to admit it, but there's people out there that they just don't love you anymore, and you know what I mean, and they move on. Like, there's people out there that just it's real. They don't. It ain't that they even love somebody else. They just lost their spark, whatever, and they're gone. And there's no guarantees. That's the one thing about life. There's no guarantees. So with all this in mind, give yourself a break and take some time. And do not go through this alone. No, you're going to have to share some of those feelings. You're going to have to. I've talked about this. Find a friend, get a counselor, whatever. You have to talk to people about it. Get some support group. Join them. They're out there. And so you notice the funny thing is we a lot of times we don't even join these groups. We're not even looking for them normally, right? You only find a support group after you need support, of course. But when you're drowning, going into a relationship and having all these people, you know what I mean? You can't get no support there. Isn't it funny that we can only really, after the bottom falls out of relationships, can we get some real help? It doesn't have to, but usually that's how it works. It's usually hard to get somebody consistently to go for counseling, right? You end up getting counseling. You're probably the most counseled person in the household, right? And you got half the other people don't want to get counseling. You know what I'm saying? So that's a struggle in itself. But I'm saying, don't go through this alone. You just might have to commit yourself for sure. But then you're going to figure out through time how much is enough for you. But don't go through this alone. It's true. Make sure that you don't isolate yourself because that will only raise your stress levels. Affect your concentration and the way you work, especially in your relationship. That's going to have an impact. And let's be thankful if it doesn't hurt our overall health because people get unhealthy in these times. See people, oh my goodness, they're not eating, they're stressing out, they're not getting out, they're not walking, they're not being active. You know, you can't be those people. You have to be those ones that can't be afraid to get outside. You can't be afraid to get active. You're going to have to keep it. You got to have that confidence. You got to believe in your personal power. You have to. And you will. You will work through it, right? You don't see it. See, because a lot of people, what they do is we're in that society where we don't believe unless we see, right? Unless we see things, many of us don't believe it. Now, there are people that believe things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about religions because they see all kinds of things. They believe all kinds of things without seeing them. And I can say, I come from the old school. I got to see what I believe too. I even like that see believe. But the truth is, there are a lot of parts of this world where you gotta believe, and especially if you're trying to survive and be resilient and endure and be successful, you have to believe. You have to put those thoughts in your head because you know what? It's real if you can make it real. That's the best thing I can say. It's real if you can make it real. And you can make it real if you actually believe. Put it in your mind and work towards it. And if just like when you're feeling down and low, yeah, okay, but We're resilient human beings. We just forgot a lot about who we are because of a lot of the influence that we got. But we got a lot of internal strengths, that mental strength, even got that physical strength. And I'll tell you, a lot of that mental and physical strength is still beating that coronavirus. I see if we thought about it more and we work together more as people and individuals, I'm sure, and we're doing it on a level for sure with chemistry and sales. But if we did it with our mental, cognitive abilities and we worked together psychologically and started, you know what I mean? We could come up with cures through our own bodies, like through our blood, because just thinking in the body, you know what I mean? It could beat these viruses if we think about it. If we put more power and concentration into our human self, because people are surviving. And I think it's a combination of things. I think it's the mind, body, the spirit, right? I believe it. The spirit means a belief, to understand it, the recognition that, yo, I'm going to get through it. And I'm gonna, is everything all the time? No, it's not. But I'm telling you, it's like medicine. It's just as good as that medicine you pull off the shelf that'll probably give you less than 60% chance of getting better in most situations. So most of it's only temporary, but the cognitive is permanent if you put it there and you really believe in something. But I'm just saying that that's a part of it, right? That's a part of it to me. So that being said, we have a lot of strength within ourselves that we can do a lot about. So if you believe, you know what, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to work through this, then you do that. And that's what you think. And when you believe that, you're going to work through it. And it's about time, but it's also about thought, right? Just don't go through it alone. Don't try to sit in silence. Don't try to handle it on your own. You got to express it because I believe when things happen to us, it has to come out in some sort of way. Our experiences. And it's funny how you might have to have a couple sit downs to put 10 years of experience past you. But it's real, right? Seriously, it's real. Putting 10 years of experience of being in a relationship, you got a lot of experience there that, you know what? It's important that you get it off your chest. It could be 10 years. 10 years it could be. So if you have to sit down with somebody, that's just what you do. Think about it. 10 years of a relationship, how long do you think you should sit down? At least a couple months, good months for yourself. Vent it, talk about things, moving past it, getting it out your system. Some people don't take that time, but give yourself some time. So you can see what I'm talking about, giving yourself a minimum of a year to take care of all your business. In addition, you got to take that time out for your personal self. See, a lot of this relationship, we all like to think it as not all bad, but a lot of it we think is the majority is just people are separating because they're upset, they're angry. Sometimes they just have differences, and some people are just okay with that. But you have to allow yourself to grieve that loss of the relationship and shared experiences. They might not have been always pleasurable for sure. You got to consider that you ain't gonna get that support no more, whether it's intellectual, social, emotional, or even any of that financial support. That's going to change, whoever you are, you know. But that's going to be gone. There is definitely going to be some switch up. And as much as we don't like to talk about it, but there are people that talk about their dreams and the plans and the hopes that they have for the future, which could even be more hurtful, could hurt that heart of yours because it's not like talking dreams. It's good to have somebody to talk dreams with, right? Not all times are bad times, but when you get into that dream territory and you start talking it with somebody, hey, you got to think about that. You got to allow yourself to feel that pain. Those losses, they're going to be scary. And the intense emotions, they're going to be hard to bear. And you're not, even though you're going to go towards that dark place, you're not going to be there forever. But you have to understand when you're dealing with grief and you're dealing with a loss or a separation, you got to understand one thing, and a counselor is going to tell you this, and everybody out there better get the word out because this is the real word. There has to be a healing process for you to let go or you to move on. And you're going to be hurt. You're going to Your world's going to change up for a period of time. And it might seem like the only thing that makes sense is that you're trying to deal with these strong emotions, is that you get into that dark place. And you try to leave the world behind. But no. Because you are coming to the realization that I'm telling you that it's not going to last forever. Is it going to hurt? Yeah. Some more than others, but it's going to hurt. And see, the thing about it, I think as human beings, I would have to say, we have an addictive personality. We do. And I'm not just talking about substance addiction. I'm talking about people addiction, like emotional addiction to people. Sometimes we do. You ever get those people that split up with people and then they're still in love with that person that they split up with, right? They move on. I don't even care. And those people could have caused problems in that relationship. They knew damn well they were causing problems in that relationship. But they get out of that relationship and they go on and they get into other relationships, but they're really reaching back to that other relationship and they love that person. You know what I mean? It's so weird how people could do that. It's just like there's no real explanation. It's not like a chain of events that's just mapped out. There's no chronology to that. It's the way it is sometimes. And I've seen it happen in certain relationships. People just have such a love for a person that they left, but they gave that person hell. Or their relationship wasn't that great, or it could have been as good as it was, it could have been better. But that person still, and that's how we are as human beings. So if we stop judging, we go, wow, that could be powerful. There's so many things that go on in relationships that some of us don't understand. But that being said, it's a process and you better take it to that, because you know what, if you don't understand that you need to have a healing process in any relationship, I don't care if you've been with the person 2 years, you got to set it out and understand that is healing is a process. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is whatever relationship you get into, right, you like, it's too many things could happen. You might even not get in a relationship because of that. But if you get into a relationship and you haven't kind of, you know what I mean, understood the healing process, it's going to come back on you. And it could not just impact your relationship, it could impact you. You see what I'm saying? It could really impact you because you did not understand that you were supposed to acknowledge that healing process. And then you start responding in your life and going back and forth. You got doubts, you got insecurities, and they start playing out in your life because of that. What? The way you handled that last relationship, your lack of understanding of the healing process. So you don't want that to impact your life later on. You have to, or for an extended period of time, right? Because you are, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. And you move on, which a lot of us do. But then it ends up creeping up, and you know what I mean? And it does impact. Why draw it out? Work through it. Understand it. Deal with it. Try to cope with it, but get support, right? Nobody wants to talk about a subject 5 years later. See, this is why it's so essentially important that when you're going through this grief and you're going through this loss and this separation, you make some contacts out there, right? You set up that support group if you need to. You get in touch with those friends because that's what you're deal with it. Take the time to understand and embrace that healing process. Do that because nobody's going to want to talk about how you're feeling about a relationship 10 years ago. They're going to go, oh, blah, blah, let's move on. You're still holding on to that. Nobody's going through that. When you're still, oh, I'm still dealing with, no. So if you need to get yourself together, these are the basics that you have to understand. And I would tell you that this part here that we're talking about is part one of our separation and divorce. And we're going to be talking about part two of separation and divorce. And I want to tell my listeners that you might have a friend. You might not be going through this yourself. You might have a friend or a loved one that could be going through it. I'm strongly recommended that you get them to lend an ear because this is something they should hear. And we're going to be going through part 2 and 3, right? And it's for you and me. It's for us to sharpen our skills to understand life, right? To support and deal and cope, because life is challenging. Life has its hard points, for sure. What? Like I said, if you expect life to be hard, it's easier. But if you expect it to be easier, it gets harder. And we're all up there doing all that, trying to get the easy life, right? Just as I talked about those lottery tickets earlier, and people trying to get the quick fix and it impact the relationships, right? Think about that. We want life to be easier, don't we? We all do. And we think that if we get $1 million or two, it's going to be easier. Well, it just might be in a lot of different ways. At least it'll be different. But the point is we as human beings, we do want things to be easier when we can. And it doesn't matter how, or we'd like things to change. We're about change. So things will happen. And I want to say thank you to my listeners. And I appreciate everything. And I'm understanding that people, when they talk about real issues, then they start to understand each other better instead of judging each other. Because there's too many people out there making comments and judging each other and making assumptions and stereotypes. And it's sad. And I would say in every culture and every race, there's a group of people who are suffering in silence because they're being categorized under the negative. And it's true. There's a negative segment to every society for sure, because we're humans. However, for those people who are um, being blanketed and blamed for the handful of foolishness out there in the world, I'd have to say you just got to hold your head up. And if you feel that you're being blanketed and blamed, you don't necessarily have to. Speaking up is great. However, what I say is live the life that you need to live. Show people, don't just talk about it. Show people that there's real care out there, that there's love for people. You don't always have to say anything, or you don't even also have to put yourself out there to be judged, because we do live in a very judgmental world. And I can understand why a lot of people don't step up. We do need people to step up for sure, but there's only a certain amount of people who are going to step up. But if you're one of those people who are in that realm where you want to be genuine to yourself, you don't necessarily have to, but you got to take action and do things. You can take action in your life. You can change things. You can influence. You can make better decisions to get other people to make better decisions. You could take the leadership role in other ways other than talking. Action's really great. Leadership needs to be spoken about. But when it comes to the population out there, we have to understand that not everybody wants to be in front of the camera or get the attention. But you do have a role to play. And I've always believed we do. So when it comes to relationships, if you have a family member or a friend that's going through even separation and divorce, and they need your support, and you feel that you've had a network of these friends and you don't want to betray or look at anybody, sometimes you can speak up, or sometimes you could just do things to support them and help them, even give them a lending ear, because it's not easy for people who are in relationships, because a lot of times you think it's just the two people. It's not. A lot of times it's family and friends. They've created this whole network of people that they've communicated, and when they separate, right, they might not be looked as favorably to those people, and they might even be on their own, or might be something that they moved on, and they're just looked at, whatever. Those dynamics have changed, but sometimes they might need a friend or someone a part of that network that can help them and support them and say things that could get them moving forward, knowing that they're not coming back into that pocket of friends and family. Just letting them know as a human being that they matter and they count. Because this is what we do as human beings. We judge too often. And you could be that supportive person, not just be the majority or the favored, right? Or the brave or the risky. We all have roles to play, and we're going to play those roles. So I want to say thank you. If we're going to play those roles, if we understand we're here to serve, to do better for each other, and to make sure that we're supporting our fellow human beings in some sort of way. Okay, so thank you. The counselor says thank you to my listeners, and we will speak again. Part 2, separation and divorce. Thank you.